Now I'm recording. Hold on.
This is my audience for speech, my speech 2, informative speech with visual aids. My speech is about memory making a memory quilt. After my mother passed away unexpectedly, I was left with an entire home filled with her belongings. I couldn't keep it all, but I didn't know what to do with it. Somehow it felt wrong to just dispose of all of her things and all of the belongings that had meant so much to her. Many people are faced with this same situation in their daily lives. And if it hasn't happened to you, it'll happen to someone that you know for sure. So today I want to show you how to take some of those belongings and lovingly craft them into a lasting and practical memorial quilt. That way you can put to use some of those beloved items and still honor the person who brought life to them. I made a quilt like this after the passing of my mother, and it helped me to relinquish the rest of her belongings without feeling like I was betraying her memory or her legacy. I'll take you through the complete process of creating a memorial quilt for your loved one, from gathering and preparing the materials to assembly and the finishing stages. First, you'll need to gather and prepare the items that you would like to use for your quilt. The first thing you'll do is go through the items and choose what you want to use. Clothing, men's ties, blankets, aprons, little trinkets, buttons, pins, things like that are all good things to choose from. Next, you'll choose the fabrics that you want to use for the base of the quilt and for the backing. You can choose from solids or prints, but make sure that it's going to be something that looks good with the memory items that you chose. Next, you'll want to choose a block pattern. If this is your first time quilting, I would suggest using a simple pattern, like a 9-patch or a pinwheel. Something that has the smallest amount of parts and that go together in even seams rather than miters. The next thing you'll want to do is gather the notions and tools that you need. So you're going to need things like thread, quilt batting, embroidery floss, and then you'll also need scissors, rotary cutter for cutting quilt blocks. You'll need a cutting pad, you'll need straight pins, and you'll need needles to go into your machine. Now that you've gathered all your materials, you're ready to begin assembling your quilt top. The first thing you'll do is measure and cut the pieces according to the block pattern that you've chosen. So you'll cut your base fabric pieces, and then you'll cut the pieces out of your memory items as well. Then you'll create individual blocks by using the block pattern that you've chosen. You'll pin the pieces in place, and then you'll sew, leaving seam allowances, and then iron those seam allowances open. Once you have a whole stack of blocks created from your memory items, you'll sew all those blocks together to create your entire quilt top. Doing the same thing, pinning each block, sewing it, and ironing it. You're now ready to finish putting your quilt together. The first thing you'll do in the finishing stage is to layer and base the pieces together. So you'll have your quilt base, which is your backing fabric, your layer of batting in the middle, and then the quilt top that you've assembled from the blocks. You'll pin those in place, and you'll use a loose basting stitch, which is just a stitch that we'll later remove, but it keeps the 3 pieces from moving while we're finishing it. The next thing you'll want to do is create the binding. A simple binding is to just cut your base layer about 2 inches larger than your top layer. And that way you can fold it over and create miters on the corners, pin it in place, and sew it down. Your finishing touches will be to remove the basting by cutting those loose stitches and removing them, and then cutting your embroidery floss into about 4-inch strips. The final stage of the process is to take the strips of embroidery floss and tie one with a square knot through all the 3 layers at each joint in the quilt. So everywhere a block meets, you'll have a little square knot. You'll tie it and then you'll trim it down. You now have a step-by-step plan for how to create a complete memorial quilt from the beginning to end from your loved one's meaningful belongings. I'd like to encourage any of you who have found yourself looking at a closet full of things that you simply have not been able to let go, to go home and look at them again in a new light. Look at them knowing that you can release the items while retaining pieces of them artfully crafted into a memorial quilt that can be passed on from one generation to the next, keeping the memory and the familial love very much alive. Thank you.